Well, what a crowd. Hello, good morning, good morning. My name is Becky Metcalf, and on behalf of Design Centre Chelsea Harbour, a very, very warm welcome to London Design Week. Isn't it lovely to be here in real life? Well, a bit of housekeeping first. If I could ask everybody just to switch their phones off, that would be really kind. Well, we have had some changes to the lineup today. Sadly, Kitten Grayson and Lena Grappin can't be here because they're unwell, but Lisa Stratton has stepped in very nobly. So thank you, Lisa. I think this is going to be a really fascinating session, and we're so thrilled that writer and editor Helen Barrett is here chairing the session. You might have seen her writings in the FT House and Home, which is still writing for, and I think we should give our panel and our moderator a very warm welcome.
Thank you very much, everyone, and very warm welcome, and best wishes to Kitten and Ino, who I know are very sorry that they can't be here, but I'd like to thank Lisa Stratton for graciously stepping in. Lisa is a senior partner in marketing and business development at Winch Design, and Lisa Montague, who is CEO of Sanderson. Welcome both. Could I start by asking each of you to introduce yourselves and your business as briefly as you can? Lisa.
You have to be called Lisa to be on the panel today. So my name is Lisa, and I'm at Winch Design. We are a global design business working across aviation, yachts and architecture all over the world with a 36-year heritage in yacht design, but now doing as many architecture projects as we are yacht projects.
And Lisa.
Thank you. I'm Lisa Montague, CEO of Sanderson Design Group. We have a nice showroom here on the first floor in the South Dome. And we have 7 brands, heritage brands as well as contemporary brands. So you might know Sanderson, the brand, Morris & Co., Zoffany, and then Harlequin, Clark & Clark, and Scion, the modern brands, and a new little B2C venture that's a sort of incubated brand called Archive. We also have 2 factories, Standfast in Lancaster that prints textiles, and Anstey in Loughborough, which is a wallpaper factory. And we employ around about 600 people globally, but most in the UK.
So it's been a turbulent 2 years since I was last here. And I thought it would be interesting. You're both running substantial businesses. So I thought it would be interesting to start by taking a look at the market, the state of the market in the UK for interiors and homeware. So I asked Statista to give me some information. And they have told me that the stats suggest that there is a lot of pent-up demand in this market. But that demand may be hampered by new challenges such as rising prices and supply chain delays. So we're going to touch on some of that today. But they said that projected sales for 2022 are back up to around £14 billion. So that's roughly how much this market is worth. A decade ago, it was worth just over £8 billion. So that's a substantial increase. Suggests there's a lot of pent-up demand, as they say. So that's the sort of the overview. I think if we could start by just going back to looking back over lockdown before we sort of moved on to the future. What did your businesses do in lockdown? How did you cope with that very turbulent 2 years, Lisa?
Well, as you say, it has been turbulent, but I think we've definitely learned a lot of lessons, and I think we will carry on most of the things that we've initiated through lockdown. So in many ways, albeit it's been a tough time, I think it's been a valuable time for us. We have done, as everybody has done, we've had to think on our feet. Our buzzword at Winch is resilience. So I think that resilience that we've learned is vital. I think any business of any size, you need that resilience. You need to be able to think on your feet. And in lockdown in particular, we've done, as everybody has, a host of different things, a lot more digital online interaction with people. And then we've looked at a couple of other initiatives, one which is a business initiative and one which is more philanthropic. On the business side, we launched a sub-brand called Studio Winch, which is looking at FF&E and decoration. We tend to do very large, sort of iconic projects that on average take maybe 5 years, which are amazing. But obviously it's a particular business model, and going forward we wanted to look at other projects which for us are considered smaller. So it could be a townhouse in New York or something like that, with a focus just on decoration rather than the sort of master planning. So that's been interesting for us. We were actually working on that before lockdown, but then when our team couldn't fly, that really became very important, and that's something that we're looking to grow very much so over the next few years. And then on a more philanthropic side, we launched our Under Winch's Wing initiative, which is aimed at supporting artisans and craftspeople who rely on us for their livelihood. And we felt that it was really important to give back at a time when people like that were really struggling. So we launched this initiative, and we have tried very hard to support them with practical advice, but also promoting them on our platforms. We did an event with them at London Craft Week. So I think it's very much a case of looking at the bigger picture, looking at the bottom line. You've got to make sure you've got enough money in the bank to pay the salaries, but also looking at what you can do to maybe help others within the industry as well as your own team. So I would say we definitely, in lockdown, have had sort of a foot in both camps. And then finally, I think on a smaller level, it's been very much about looking after our team. I think it's been a tough time for everybody for a host of different reasons. So we launched a lot of initiatives just aimed at keeping people going, keeping them engaged, keeping them resilient, and with a big focus on communication.
We'll come back to retention,
Yeah.
because staff retention and recruitment is a big problem for businesses, small and large. I'm interested to know, of the digital pivots that you talked about, if you could talk a little bit more about what you've kept and what was temporary and what was permanent and what accelerated under lockdown.
I would say really everything we will keep. What's interesting in our business is that our teams travel all the time. Most of our projects are overseas. And we had been looking at reducing that anyway, just in terms of our carbon footprint. But I think we've reached a hybrid where we see the merit in communicating digitally and communicating on video and all those ways. But I think it's also just highlighted the fact that seeing people face to face and a handwritten letter are also really important. So I think, as I said, it's taught us really valuable lessons. The fact that we have to keep moving forward. We need to look always at different ways of doing things. But you also sometimes need to look back at the real sort of pivots that keep the business going and that matter. So we're, for instance, doing a lot more on VR, which clients love. So they put the headset on and then they are walking around their house, their yacht, their plane. It's mind-blowing. But also sending a handwritten note to somebody just to remind them that you're thinking of them and that you're still there. I think both have equal merit. So I would say going forward, we will definitely adopt that hybrid approach of doing both things. But I think what lockdown did teach us was that you need to take the time to consider what you're doing. We are lucky enough to be very busy all the time, and it's full on at Winch every day. And we are running to stand still. And I would say for anybody with any business, if you take that time to just step back, one of the greatest things that I was ever told was, don't always be the person on the dance floor at the party, be the person standing on the balcony watching everybody else dancing. And actually that's such a good thing to bear in mind with any business. I think we all get so bogged down with the day-to-day, whatever it might be, whatever scale, and you need to step back and have a slightly more objective view. And I think lockdown has perhaps given our business more time to do that because people were not on and off planes or in meetings. So I think we've definitely used that to and I know that we're going to talk about vision, but I think it's given us an opportunity to really think about our sort of vision and to just almost take stock, which I think in any business is a good thing to do.
We'll come back to vision, because vision is absolutely central, particularly to creative businesses. Lisa, lockdown was a very busy time for Sanderson. You made the most of it. Absolutely.
That sounds terrible. But yeah, I think we were in a very different situation because, I was brand new to the industry. And I started literally 3 years ago, I think, at this show. I caught COVID here 2 years ago. And so I'd hired quite a new team to come in from sales, marketing, operations. The last person of the team joined in the January, and boom, we went into lockdown. We furloughed 500 people. We closed both factories for longer than they'd ever been closed. We didn't know if they'd open up again and the machines would run. So it was utterly terrifying. And we had a new board who wanted to know if we'd exist. And we had auditors, crawling all over everything. I think I did 84 cash flow scenarios. So we were literally doing that weekends, evenings, working 24/7. I did have COVID at the time as well, to prove that we could exist. And then at some point, I just went, enough. I've proved we can do this. If we don't start thinking about what we can do to grow and be positive and come back with some creative projects, you can prove you can exist all you like, but you can drive yourself right into the hole that you're trying to avoid. So I think there's a motorcycling analogy, and I don't ride a bike, but don't look into the hole, look beyond it. And I think that was very much, at some point as a CEO, my job was to say, okay, I've proven we can avoid that hole in the road, but we need to go further. So yeah, we furloughed a lot of people, and then we quickly brought some back because we realised not the whole world had locked down. So hence webinars, because people in New Zealand wanted to see the new collections we'd just launched. We couldn't get the pattern books out because the pattern bookmakers were closed. So hence digital design books were born, because we had all the designs digitally, of course, because that's how they're created. So we've started to serve, and again, we've continued that as you have, those digital pivots. Not everybody is a QVC presenter naturally, so some of the designers really struggled with that, and we did some quick training sessions and asked for volunteers of who wants to lead the webinars. But the team really enjoyed it, actually, and they really quickly got used to that. So we've carried that on, and so we now preview collections all digitally. And of course, we then produce pattern books. But we produce them with a bit of intelligence as well, because we get feedback from the digital books. And if somebody loves something, we make more of it. And if they don't, we don't. And that really helps. So we're producing much more, in a way, with a forecast or a bit of feedback from the market, which is really, really helpful. And then creatively, we were very concerned that with the factories being closed, of course, nobody could really launch new collections. And I think financial constraint, crisis, economic difficulties can really constrain creativity. So we furloughed the designers for a long time, but then we had to bring them back with something to be really inspired by. So because we own the factories and we came back with the collection, the first one was the kids for Harlequin, because children had not had holidays, they'd not been to school, they'd been stuck in their rooms looking at the same four walls, and we thought a kids collection, which is albeit quite niche and maybe not the most commercial thing to do, would at least be uplifting, would put a smile on people's faces. And we had the digital presentations animated so that it was quite fun. We had a little sample pack with face masks and colouring things, and just to lighten things up a little bit. And then the next thing was Ben Pentreath for Morris, to give a bit of a shot in the arm, and he kindly photographed it all in his own house because he couldn't find a photographer, we couldn't get the digital stuff done, and that gave it another element that people felt was really personal. And Claire, who's our design director, managed to colour it because she knew her way around through the back door of the factory. They were briefing each other by Zoom on the colour, and I think he gave tomato soup as a reference for the red, and we were like, okay, we'll try and do that. But it was fun, and I think it was almost back to basics of, the way you work when you're starting a business, and people think we're a big corporate, but it's nonsense, really. We've got sort of 9 different businesses within a very medium-sized whole group, and actually each one is a small business in its own right. And when push comes to shove, you just roll up your sleeves and you get into the weeds and deal with those things. So it was a real lesson, and I think it brought people together because of that.
I'm curious to know, was there a moment when you realised that you were going to get through it, and when was that moment?
Well, I'm a bit half full as a cup. So I always believe we're going to get through it, because you can survive no matter what's thrown at you. Well, we might have a little challenge coming now geopolitically, but generally speaking, in economic conditions, you can normally mitigate. There are things that we could do, and it might mean, and we did have to adjust the size of the business. There were 10% of the people who no longer work with us. to get through it, to make sure that we could support the whole, and that's very difficult if you're one of the 10%. But actually everybody understood that to protect the greater number of jobs, we had to make sure that our costs were under control, and there was no income. You know, the UK was largely closed down, and you know, a lot of the other markets were too. Europe was deeply affected. The whole of Southern Europe took a long time to come back, and then we threw Brexit into the mix just to make sure it stayed exciting. So, you know, and now, you know,
Yeah.
I thought we might be looking forward to a nice economic bit of tranquility, but oh no.
Well, I hesitate to say that we're post-pandemic, but we're certainly not where we were a year ago in terms of being locked down. But we do face new challenges, and one of those that all businesses have faced is the problem of retention, staff retention and recruitment, finding the right staff, finding trained staff. And there's been something called the Great Resignation, which most businesses have been affected by. Could you talk a bit about how you have both, within your respective businesses, kept staff or tried to keep hold of staff or dealt with those problems? Lisa, how have you done that at Winch?
Well, I think Winch has a unique culture. We were, well, Andrew, our founder, started the business 36 years ago, so it has that sort of family feel. And I think Andrew has been very clever at ensuring that everybody understands that, and I would say that's been a real positive in the pandemic. That doesn't mean that, you know, people haven't been affected and we haven't lost people who've maybe just thought, I just want to move abroad or do something completely different. But I think that we do work hard at looking after our team. We're about 150 people, and because we've grown so much, we're actually in, I think, 9 or 10 different small buildings, which we're hoping to change. But so for us, internal communication is critical, even before the pandemic, because we're in so many different buildings. So that, again, gave us good lessons that we could put into play when everybody was working from home. And so within my team, we do a lot of internal comms stuff, and we, like everybody, did quite a lot on Zoom. But I have to say, I think these sort of fake, jolly team meetings on Zoom are not winners.
Did you try them?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. And you could see, you know, people sort of sitting, people switching their cameras off, has obviously gone out to walk the dog, and, you know, and you're going, isn't this fun? And, you know, and it's that we'll deliver everybody a glass of wine to their desk at home, and you're also going, you know, I mean, I think some of those things, we sort of avoided those quite early on. I'm a great believer in, if something isn't working, don't keep doing it, and telling yourself that, isn't this great, we're all chatting on screen, and then, you know, there's always somebody that's got the dog in the background, the wife in the background, the kids in the background. You know, it just, I don't think, was as good as everybody was trying to make it seem as though it was. So we didn't do a huge amount of that, but we have our internal magazine, which we do every month, but we were doing it every week. I mean, just online, but just keeping people in touch with each other. So, you know, I think there are ways that you just have to keep trying, but also acknowledging when something isn't working and say, we've tried that, that's really not achieving much, let's do something else. So, and you know, when we came back to the office, you know, we had a lot of false starts of, well, hey, we're all back in the office for half an hour, and then, nope, we're all going home again. So we had a lot of, you know, we'd get food trucks and coffee carts and, you know, bring everybody together, and we're all back in the office, and then, you know, a month later, nope, sorry. So we did a lot of that, and very much tried to just bring people together in that way. And yeah, I think, like everybody, just trying to navigate through it. I mean, I don't think there's a sort of golden ticket on how to sort of manage that.
The retention.
Really, there isn't.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think some people, as I said, we've lost people who just are, I'm 30, I want to change, I don't want to be in London or whatever. Absolutely, good luck, and off they go. We've had a slightly odd situation, which we've been lucky enough, and I'm loath to say that we've grown substantially in the pandemic as a business. At the beginning of the pandemic, it was like, oh my goodness, and we were very worried, but we have grown. So we've had the opposite issue, which is trying to recruit. So if anybody knows anybody good looking for a job, come come and see me afterwards.
What are you trying to, which areas? Is it the skilled areas? Because obviously you employ a lot of specialists.
Yes, it is. But across the board, we've been recruiting. And I think the issue that we've had is recruiting. At the beginning of the pandemic, there were lots of people available because people were being made redundant. But now it's really difficult. And then getting people up to speed, trying to do it remotely, particularly the people working in the design teams. And as I said, our projects are incredibly complex and maybe have, a core team of 6 working on, for instance, one project for 5 years with then add-ons with, procurement, furniture design, and obviously, marketing and HR and all the other things. So trying to recruit those people and get them embedded in this very strong culture that we have when they're just sitting in their bedroom at home, that's been particularly hard. So for us, that's been a bigger issue than retention,
Right.
albeit acknowledging that a lot of people have said, I've had enough, I want to change my lifestyle, I'm off.
Yeah.
So.
And Lisa, you're managing, effectively a string of small businesses, a very different challenge for you in terms of retention and recruitment.
Yeah, I have to say, we haven't seen this big resignation. So whether it hasn't affected the industry as much, or it hasn't got to us yet, or there's a different reason, I'm not sure. It'd be interesting to hear other people's view, but I think there might be a few things affecting it, and some of them are what Lisa said as well, which is that, when I started, actually, we had an engagement score, and it was terrible. It was an engagement survey across the group, and it was really bad. But that was great for me because it was a line in the sand, and then a lot of the feedback was about communication, and we have, the factories in Lancaster, there's another one in Loughborough, the head office is in Denham, we've got the showroom here. It's a little bit, difficult to get around all those sites all the time with consistent messages. So we've done an awful lot of work on that from the go-get. So for the last 3 years, so we were already a year into, I was really trying to improve the internal communication across the business and really get out to the factories. So when we do, our results and things, company results, we go out and talk to everybody now. And not only, and then it's the old 3 ways of communicating. So yes, we have had lots of team meetings on Zoom. We were having daily leadership team meetings. Each of the leadership were having daily meetings with their team just to keep everybody on board, whether we did have the kids on the knees and the pets in the background, whatever. And at least those gave conversation points, because I think the other thing was being so remote. And in the factories, of course, not everybody has an email address. So, you have to bear in mind everybody's different lifestyles. How to reach the messaging, get out there in COVID was really difficult. So I started doing a weekly newsletter, which was literally, thoughts on a postcard, thoughts of the day, what's happening this week, how we're dealing with COVID, what we're hearing back from the workforce, and people started to write in with their ideas. And that was great because, people managed to distribute it out and around. And we've kept doing that. So when we came out of the pandemic, I sort of said, look, is this useful to everybody? Yes, we want it. So we've kept doing that, which was really important. And I think you can't do better than really, keep communicating with people and keep them involved, because we don't know what's going on in the rest of somebody's life. I know what's going on with them at work, but, everybody's suffered. And we don't really always know to what degree, because not everybody shares. So only if somebody tells you, do you know what's going on with the kids and the parents and what people have lost and how much they've suffered. So that was really important. I think we've had 2 or 3 resignations for different reasons recently. One was because they came in to do a real change project and it's kind of done, so that's fine. A designer who just wants a different lifestyle, which I think is probably quite representative of how people are feeling, to go off and work independently on the beach somewhere. I mean, how glorious to do that. So, completely understand. We'd all do that, really, if we could. And so people have really reassessed their lives. I've been back in the office because I can't work at home because my husband's very noisy on Zoom calls and the house is a bit open plan. So I've been back in the office since March. And I've had people coming to talk to me, which is the benefit, obviously, being in, about, I need my dining room table back. Can I come back into the office? Yeah, we've got space for 120 people. Pick your desk. And then others saying, I really love working from home. I just don't want to come again. And we've hired people recently who would only join us on the basis, or have made the choice to join us because we were so relaxed about work where you want. As long as it works for you as an individual and the team, which is really important, and the business, in terms of, I don't want to see productivity drop. I don't care, as long as it works. And I think that's much more difficult for creatives than it is for, somebody in finance or credit control who can really adequately work from home. It's not a problem. So I think, we haven't come out with any strong policies. And that might be where the difference is in terms of the Great Resignation could be more applicable to companies that have been quite prescriptive about you've all got to come in or you've all not to come in. I've got two brothers-in-law who are having a big, robust conversation because one had been told you've got to come to the office and didn't want to, and the other one had been told you may not and really wanted to. and I was saying, just calm down, it'll all settle down eventually, people will find their way, and as long as it works for you as an individual, it will find our way. So that I'm kind of great believer in the fact that water finds its level. People, as long as the team works and people are happy in that environment, we'll adjust then to it. And we probably, will change the office structure at some point or the structure of the network. But we need to see what that's going to be first. I don't think we're fully there yet.
Yeah, that's interesting. And have you measured engagement since? So you said it was low 3 years ago when you joined.
Yes, no, it was shockingly low. It was really awful. And the worst thing was that, top leadership got the most of the battering. So that was a really good opportunity. That was a great opportunity for me because it wasn't, I'd not been there long, so I don't think it was, about me. But, it's been a wonderful opportunity to do that and to really focus on it. And so, yes, 2 years later, which was just this last May, we had another one and there was a huge increase, which was really rewarding. And I think every part of the business has come together around it. And we've done a lot as well around making sure we might talk separately about purpose and so on, but also bringing together a very transversal Live Beautiful campaign around how we embed ESG and sustainability across and how that completely dovetails into the business strategy so that everybody can get involved, and that gives everybody something to talk about and something to contribute to that's not a commercial objective always, about let's sell more, because sometimes you just have to come around human projects as well. So that could be people that want to do a packaging project or come up with ideas about how to embed sustainability in design or life cycle of the product, or it could be people doing community projects and charitable work, and we work as well with Quest, which is the charitable arm of the Royal Warrant Holders Association, because Sanson has the Royal Warrant. We work now also with Walpole, we work with furniture makers. That's all new as well. So those are new initiatives that we've worked with to bring people through. I think access to the industry is really important to open up. When we talk about diversity, inclusion, there's a big ask to go into the schools and to bring people through and to understand what all the different opportunities are. You don't have to be the best designer on the planet to have a fabulous career with us.
So if we could talk a bit now and look at some of those opportunities. I mean, I said at the beginning that projected sales for 2022 are back up to around 14 billion in this sector. So there's a lot of pent-up demand. People have spent a lot of time at home. They want to change their home and surroundings. We know this. There's lots of surveys that have suggested it. So there's big opportunities in this market. When you're thinking about, and both of you have worked in businesses of different sizes across your careers. When you're thinking about in business cycles, when you see an opportunity to scale up like this, when the macro conditions are right for scaling up, where do you start? Lisa?
I believe strongly that any business, and particularly probably a creative business, that you need to have a very strong, not only a strong vision, but also a very strong sort of base underpinning that, because for a business to survive what we've all been through in the last couple of years, there was the crash in 2008, we've now got goodness knows what on the horizon. You have to have that, and I think it really is critical. I'd say for any size to have that is absolutely key. And so for us, we have spent a lot of time over the last 5-6 years as a business looking at the bigger picture. So putting in a strong management team, having a sort of couple of non-execs, pushing the management, sort of the senior management to take on more responsibility, then encouraging those, the tier below, to start taking on more. So I would say in terms of scaling up, you need to look at the people and the process. And I would say that actually doing it organically, if you can, is the best way. I'm always slightly nervous when people have got all of their projections of we're going to do this and we're going to grow by 10% and this and that, but they're not actually looking at how they're going to do that. And what we are doing, and actually we're doing a lot this year, because as I said, we've actually grown a huge amount in the last couple of years. We're almost taking a sort of a side step and going back to look at those sort of pillars of the business and looking at some of the boring elements, but that's what keeps the business going. So, we are doing a lot of work around, as I said, process. This whole sort of internal communication is key. And then just looking at our systems and processes, I think is critical. The other thing I think is really important if you're looking at scaling up is taking time to find out what people outside your business think of you. I think it's really easy when you're busy to be so convinced that you know what people on the outside think of your business. I think we all do that. Well, I'm this and we do that and we make this and this is our brand and everybody understands it. And then you go and ask somebody and they're like, sorry, I didn't know you did that. So we've actually done some research as well during lockdown, which is fascinating, just asking people, what do you think of our business? And for us, it's interesting because, as I said, we've been founder-driven and we are in a transition phase. We've become employee-owned, which we're going to talk about later, I think, possibly. But so it's been a big time of learning for us, recalibrating, looking at what we're doing, being really honest, and that's another thing I think is critical. Be really honest about your business, your objectives, what you're good at, what you're not so good at, and sort of own that, because once you acknowledge that, you can move forward. I think businesses that fail, it's when they're not really looking at the business and maybe a little bit scared to take honest feedback and to say, well, you might think you're the best at this, but actually everybody in the industry thinks you're really dull and boring. So what are you going to do about that? But you need to know that, because there's no point in you saying, well, I think we're really exciting and dynamic, and everybody else is going, nope. So there's all of those things that I think come into play, whether you're sort of scaling up from one person to two, or whether you're buying another factory or whatever it might be. I would say never lose sight of those core business principles that are critical for any business. And as I said, at the moment, we've come out of a pandemic. There's that lovely meme of, I really enjoyed that 5 minutes between the pandemic and World War III, which is not that funny, but it just goes to show that you come out of something and think, right, off we go again, and something else comes, and you have to, in terms of scaling up, I think you have to be very careful, and that's why, for me, the organic growth and plugging in the different elements that support that, whilst always looking forward, are critical. I worry that if people are so focused on 20% growth year on year, and then something comes out of left field and it all falls apart. And also, I think the other last point to measure, and we've been talking about this, is growth and success is not just about how much money you make. And I think that's really important to acknowledge that growth and success is about engagement, it's about how your people feel, it's about what you're doing for your industry, for your community, it's about how you operate. So I think all of those things are really important drivers in terms of anybody that's scaling up.
Mm. Lisa, what would your lessons for scaling up be?
I think it's it's really interesting. It depends where you're starting, but the principles, I think when you go back to sort of the 3 Ps, and I think it all comes together. We should probably work together at some point and do collaboration. It's for me, it's people, products, and processes, which is more or less, I think, what you were saying as well. If you've got the product right, and I'm assuming we're all kind of creative businesses in some way, shape, or form, and I was in fashion and leather goods before, and it's the same structure of the business, really. Different pressures, different pace, maybe, but it's very similar in the way that if you can be the most talented designer, but if you don't have a support structure around you, it's really hard to run a business if that's not your strength. And actually, so that business creative partnership, and I ran Loewe before I came here, and that LVMH, how they have 72 houses, and It's very successful when you get the business and creative, the CEO and the CEO and the creative director that bond, and you have that moment where you feel it, and it's kind of in the groove, we used to call it, and everything's going right because you're completely aligned, and it comes together, and everybody's working towards the same things, alignment, and then the rest of the team come around you. And if you can find that, whether it's because you're a designer and you find the right financial advisor, business person that can coach or mentor or come together and not rip you off, because a lot of them do, that's really important. And so I think in terms of team, it comes together, and that's why the first thing I did now was to bring the team together, and not all from the industry, from different walks of life, but the best finance partner we could find, the best sales director who happens to be in the room, and marketing, which was a function that was missing. We didn't have any marketing. These are brands. Brands don't market themselves. You need to think about how to bring them to life. And anybody who might remember the terrible Style Library fiasco, we had to get rid of that, and that takes a bit of skill to kind of peel it all back and get rid of it and start again, which is what we did sort of pretty well during lockdown. We changed the name of the group, we had new websites, and so that brings the team together. So I think that team that's if you've got a big digital operation, then you need a really experienced marketing person to come in, and that can be freelance or as an employee, depending what the size of your business is. And I think you feel it. I mean, at Loewe, we grew during the financial crisis, which with a lot of support, because Spain needed a good news story, and we had one because we were going out there and opening in Italy and London and New York, and it was all exciting, and people needed that. And I think sometimes as a small business, you don't have to be as affected by macroeconomics to grow. Grow when it's the right time for you, because all these things are lined up and you've got processes and systems, which sounds terribly dull and boring, but it's really important to at least have something that gives you a platform to grow, that works well enough to get to the next stage, whatever that is.
Creative owners, creative business owners, I'm thinking particularly of small businesses, are they the best at realising when they need to bring in outside expertise? In your experience, and how do you know? How do you know? What are the signals? If you're a business owner, how do you know when you need to bring in better accountants?
Usually somebody tells you, and often by that stage it's too late. Often, I think you can all agree. There's plenty of case studies on this. Usually, we all sometimes you can, if the business doesn't change and doesn't move on, and your business is aging with your customers, then the next generation is going to struggle with that. I mean, that's just how life is in demographics, and it happens to all of us. Often we don't see it, and often we don't plan for the next steps before we find ourselves in them, and it's too late. So I think always having that eye to the future is really, really important. And you talked about vision, you mentioned vision. Knowing where you're going is quite important, and that doesn't only apply to business, but, kind of where are you going, how are you going to get there? It's fairly fundamental.
I mean, vision is quite a nebulous term, and we hear a lot about it in creative businesses. What is it? How do you get it? How do you know when you've got one? And can you change it, Lisa?
Gosh. I mean, I think it's tricky because I'm a great believer that, we can all learn or copy somebody else and write a great vision statement and, use all the big words, and it's, I must know what I'm doing because I've got it written down here. I think it has to come from the heart, the vision. I think that is what needs to be the starting point. You then can add on all of the different business principles and whatever it is necessary. But I think if you have that passion, and I think that's something, again, that probably we're lucky enough at Winch, because Andrew, our founder, had such a strong vision and so much passion. That's how we understand to do the business, which is let that passion lead you rather than sitting around a table going, we must write a vision because we need to put it on the website, and everybody's going, well, this is a good big word, let's put this in, and not really letting it flow organically through the business. So, I mean, I'm a great believer in doing everything instinctively and from a place of passion and belief. So I would say that should be the start point. Having said all of that, I think you do need a vision, And I think one of the biggest issues for any business, and I've seen it with so many businesses that I've been involved with, large and small, you have to have the courage of your conviction. You also need to listen when people say to you, actually, you really need outside help. But when you've agreed that vision with your trusted group, you need to keep that in here. Because where it goes awry is when you come up with your new ad campaign or your new website and somebody goes, oh, I don't like that, or don't understand that. And you're like, oh, we better change it. We better change it. You have to have that courage, I think. And I think vision is about having courage, but whilst listening to really good people around you. Because, again, the dangerous person is somebody with a huge ego who is convinced that they're really good at everything and strides through, and then it fails abysmally because they haven't had all the different elements that we've talked about. So I think it's having that strong vision and then surrounding yourself with people who are much more experienced than you, much better than you at certain areas. And then I think you can keep moving forward with that vision and tweak it from time to time. The world changes, business changes. You need to be nimble and you need to be open to change. But I think the dangerous thing is brands or businesses that are sort of going after this and then, oh, no, we're now going over here, and oh, no, now we're going over there. I think that's when it doesn't work. So I would say vision is important, but it needs to come from here rather than having been to sort of marketing school.
Fascinating. I'm going to throw questions out now to the audience. We've got 10 or 15 minutes. Does anyone have any questions?
Come on.
Appalling moment. Well, yes.
If you could just wait for the microphone and then everybody can hear it.
Of course. Hi. The talk's been really great. It really has. And I just wondered, in terms of making money and creativity and sort of holding your own in the market when you know and have that belief that your product or your service can do really well and has such potential, I suppose just any tips or skills where you've kind of had to sort of manage any doubts on that sort of financial side and sort of, yeah, because often the two can be a bit conflicting sometimes, when you're trying to put a value on your own creativity. And I guess just any tips there on in.
Do you know?
Yeah, Lisa.
It was what I was about to say anyway, so that's great. Thank you. Thank you for a very well-timed question. When I joined Sanson Design Group, it was actually called Walker Green Bank. I don't know if you remember that, but it wasn't green or a bank, so we changed the name. We are a design group. There was no apparent vision, which is, I think, what the criticism was. And it was really run purely on passion. So the designers were all very passionate about what they were doing, but nobody had checked in if anybody actually wanted it. So I think the market's very crowded. There's lots of beautiful products, so you have to think about that. And at the end of the day, so the business, is now making more money because we've sorted out a few things. I think if you need to get the basics right, because the definition of business is actually, to make profit. And we're a public company, so we're PLC, we're quoted. And we have to answer to investors. We have a big bunch of shareholders that are owners who I'm answerable to. And so they want to hear about the passion and the reasons and the vision, but they only want to hear about it if you're making money. If you're not making money, you don't get to answer those questions because, somebody else will be there doing it for you. So I think, with us, it was very much about, okay, how can we take this tremendous base and heritage brands that started in 1860 and give them a future, as well as, we've got Morris & Sons and Softley, as I mentioned, but also the new brands, and how do we separate all those things and make sure that each thing on its own is valid, that it's true to the creative vision and the potential, and I love this 14 billion, we're very small, there's obviously a long way to grow. There's a big market out there, but how can we take our place? How can we have the respect to the brand and give the design integrity of all of that and make it commercially viable? Because at the end of the day, what are we doing it for otherwise? So the vision has to be, I think, creative vision, but also supported with a business vision that dovetails. That was what I said earlier, really. When you get that right, that's when it's a great success, and you can really take it forward. And then take it forward how far? How big can it be? I mean, I don't know. I don't suppose we'll get from 100 million to 14 billion and take, huge amounts of the market share. But actually, how much can you grow and what's reasonable? And then where do you start to tip the point of over-distributing or being, too mass? And lots of brands, there's lots of examples of that in luxury brands as well. Or licensing is important for Morris. And that's great, but it's a very fine balance and a sensitivity between driving a commercial project to get greater reach for the brand and actually overexposing it. So I think those are all things to... Does that answer your question? Sorry.
Very much a female-led industry, and I think sort of sometimes trying to creatively make a living can be sometimes quite a challenge, I guess, in terms of not only behavioural skills but also market share and understanding the market. And when I look back at so many creative brands, they've not known the potential that they've had until they've really got there. Do you know that kind of way? So it was any tips really, because obviously your businesses have done really,
But
really well.
I think that's quite a female thing as well, is that we're often sort of embarrassed to talk about profitability or making money. If you're a man, you do. If you're a woman, you often don't. So I would say that you need to own that and say, I want to be successful. As I said, success is not just measured in how much money you make, but as Lisa said, that is running a business. There's no point in having these rosy-coloured spectacles on and thinking, I'm just going to waft about and design something beautiful and not be able to feed yourself. So I would say that, I'm really passionate about young women in particular having the confidence and the drive to take a creative business and learn the skills that you need to make that business a success, because that's how you get change. And I think, most women, I'm the same, I can't talk to it, but, I always, we often look at what we've done wrong, wow, I'm not so good at this or whatever, and I think that doesn't change even when you get to my age. But I think, over time, it's supporting each other, asking advice. Don't be afraid to say to somebody, what do you think of my product? Look at what other people are doing. Look at what they're charging. Never price yourself out of a market for no reason, because that's very short-sighted. But use the opportunity to say, I want to do what I'm doing, if it's something creative, but I want to make money. I want to make this a business, and that's great. That's a really good thing to aspire to. It's not something to be embarrassed about or thinking, God, I made quite a lot of money last year. But in England in particular as well, you're like, so sorry. It's profitable.
Would either of you recommend mentors, finding mentors?
Yes.
Have you had mentors yourself, business mentors,
I've
or
been
career mentors?
hugely lucky in being supported all the way through my career. I think to probably, a degree that I really appreciate now and try to offer that. We have a futures team at work that we champion particularly through different bits of we've had a program running as a pilot, I suppose, for the last year or so with some education, some mentoring from within the company, and now we're finishing it off with a sort of mini MBA type thing, and that's been really rewarding. I would definitely suggest mentoring, coaching, whichever, depending how much help you want. And I really don't think it's a gender thing. We're absolutely equal opportunities. We have quite an equal, across 600 people from leadership down. We have an equal split on the board of men and women. We have an equal split on the leadership team, and we're pretty well equal all the way through with more or less, well, no gender pay gap, although I think we're just calculating it now to make sure that that's the case. I could have tipped it. So I don't think you should, diversity is really important to bring different types of people around you, because you get rich thought and decision making is better.
Mm-hmm. Lisa, did you have a mentor?
No. No, so I'm sort of self-taught, I think. I mean, retrospectively, I can't say whether it would have been good having a mentor. As I said, I'm very pro mentoring other people. It's something I feel very strongly about. But no, I didn't.
Mm-hmm. Any more questions from the audience?
Just for one more.
Okay.
This is your opportunity.
I have one.
Oh dear.
Am I allowed to ask? I'd like to ask both of you, what was the most valuable lesson you learnt in the past 2 years, Lisa, at Winch?
Oh, I mean, I think there were lessons being learnt daily, probably hourly. I would say, there are so many. I would say probably communication, because I think in the pandemic it highlighted that. I mean, I think it's so important anyway, and you alluded to it. You know, I think whatever the business size or whatever, but I really think that sort of real engagement with people is probably one of the most important things that's come out of the pandemic. And I think we've seen, you know, people saying, oh, it's absolutely fine working from home, but actually for a lot of people it really isn't. And I think it's highlighted the fact that, you know, most human beings benefit from being around other human beings. So that's it in its most simplistic sense. And then beyond that, it's how you develop that communication, how you're adaptable in terms of how you communicate and how you communicate with your different audiences. And I think that's probably the thing that I would say has been key in the pandemic.
Lisa, what at Sanderson?
Well, she stole my line. I mean, I think communication, honestly, for everybody, and it goes back a little bit to what you were asking about vision and mission, and, you know, what are we doing? Why are we doing it? How are we doing it? And to just explain that, not because we have to justify ourselves, but we have to bring everybody on the journey and help them through this kind of turbulent water. So, no matter how it is, I think, you know, just don't stop talking. In some ways, and
Even if it's on Zoom.
yeah, whatever it takes, you know, whatever it takes, whatever channel, platform, because we just need to bring everybody together and help them on this next, you know, leg of the journey.
Mm-hmm. But it can be hard to remember to call staff, can't it? When you're
I mean, you need
bogged
to,
down in the daily running.
well, you know, my middle name is probably planning. You know, I like to know what I'm doing sort of this time next year and every step in between. So, you know, I think you do have to diarise things and say, okay, one day a week I'm going to talk to customers, and another day a week I'm going to write this newsletter every Monday morning. I'm going to think about what I'm going to say this week and actually put time aside. So I have time on a Monday morning to do that. I think, what am I going to talk about this week and how am I going to make it interesting? To the team, and the newsletter goes out on a Friday, you know, and then we plan the rhythm of the year and the communication points. And at one point in lockdown, you know, because I never got out to see customers because I was new, so I hadn't met a lot of the customers, and then we couldn't go. So we did a few days where we said, okay, we're going to speak to 6 customers today and just pick them randomly and talk to different people, because although the profile of different people can look the same on paper, they're not. You know, when you talk to them, everybody's got their own strengths and their own ambitions and their own fears, and, you know, it's all individual relationships. So,
yeah,
I think just communication in whatever it takes, whether it's written, whether it's through visuals, you know, because people respond differently to different things. So sometimes you have to do it in writing and creatively visuals and also talking.
Yeah.
So I used to do lots of little recordings, you know, standing in the bathroom, you know, with the phone, doing little video messages, and, you know, keeping all of that up.
Okay.
Because that's where the light was better.
So thank you both so much for sharing so much. You've given real insight into 2 fabulously successful businesses, Lisa Montague and Lisa Stratton. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, that was pretty amazing, wasn't it? Goodness me, what a privilege to hear the session this morning. We covered a lot of ground, the 3 Ps, people, product, process. What else? Passion, courage of your convictions, honesty about your business, an eye to the future, an openness to change, flexibility, resistance, communication and engagement. Lisa says, keep talking. Thank you for your passion, your candour, your enthusiasm. You're definitely glass half full kind of people, don't you think? I think we should give them a very big round of applause.